Well, good afternoon, everyone. I get to say that it's 1 minute past noon where we are here in Orange County, California. Thank you so much for joining us during Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. We are so excited. This is the first of many events that we've got happening over the next couple of weeks. Today, we're going to be having a discussion about the economics of affordability and how to better understand the financial realities here in Orange County. This Awareness Week has been the effort of over 20 organizations that are all local to Orange County that come together every year to say, what is it that we want to bring to our community during Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week? What do we think is important to be having dialogues around, to be inviting our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues to engage in conversation around. And so I'm really excited to kick off our first event today around this topic that we know has such an impact on homelessness. And I realized that I forgot to introduce myself and explain who I am. So let me do that. My name is Bex Hayho. I am the Executive Director of United to End Homelessness with Orange County United Way. And I'm really thrilled today to be joined by three experts, two local experts, one state expert. And so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So Henry, I'm going to come to you first.
Thanks so much, Bex. And it's an honor to be with all of you here this afternoon, 2 minutes after noon. So we're there. So I'm Henry Gascon. I'm the Director of Program and Policy Development with United Ways of California. And our role primarily is to support the great work of the 28 local United Ways throughout the entire state, including Orange County United Way. And they've done a great job in helping low-income families and children with financial stability, with education, and with homelessness prevention initiatives. And I'm glad to be with all of you here today, this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Henry. Dr. Wallace, I'll come to you next.
Oh, thank you so much. Great to be here with everybody today. Wallace Walrod, I'm Chief Economic Advisor at Orange County Business Council, and then also play the same role at the Southern California Association of Governments. So housing and homelessness are very important to both of those organizations. So really great to be here. Got my PhD from UCI, so local, but have lived in Orange County since I was about 15 years old. So great to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Wallace. LaVal.
Hello, LaVal Brewer, President and CEO of South County Outreach, a hunger and homeless prevention organization here in South Orange County, serving 11 cities from Irvine down to San Clemente. Our organization is helping families stay housed, prevent homelessness through the Family Solutions Collaborative, through our access point, and to provide a client choice food pantry here in Orange County. I've lived in Orange County for about 20-something years, was born and raised in South Los Angeles in the area of Watts, and have a real clear understanding of what's happening economically in the Watts area, the Los Angeles area, as well as here in Orange County. Looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. And with those sort of bios and intros, now everybody else can understand why I'm so excited to have your three voices in this dialogue. But before we start talking about economics, we're going to sort of go to that human part of who we are. You know, I am not an economist, but I understand that the economy plays such a huge role and impacts so many facets of our life. And so I would just love to hear from each of you. What is it that inspires you about the work that you do? Wallace, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's interesting. You know, I actually had another job before I went back to graduate school to get my PhD. And I was fortunate that there was a professor there who taught something that wasn't called economics, but it's called regional science. And basically what that is the nexus of economics and geography, basically location-based. So it's actually perfect for the work I do now. And what I love about, as I got more and more familiar with economics, it's a lens to look through life on, because everything has costs and benefits. And we as individuals, there's some economists, it's all about like the Federal Reserve interest rate and all that kind of stuff. I'm more of the economist that it's about the choices and decisions you make on a daily basis. That's really, in a lot of ways, you can look at that through an economic lens. And it doesn't always have to be about money. You know, it costs me time. And so you're always doing the trade-offs. So that's what I love about it, that it kind of gives you a lens on a different way of looking at life. So yeah, I love working, you know, understanding neighborhoods, cities, regions, what makes them tick, what are the, you know, the positive aspects, but then what also needs to be worked on. And this is definitely an area that needs to be worked on.
I can hear the passion coming through if you speak. LaVal, how about you?
I guess what inspires me about the work that I'm doing, or work that we are doing in the collective organizations similar to ours who are doing this work, is it's not just the support that we provide for low-income families or people who suddenly find themselves in a position to where they can't afford their food or their housing. It's really the small communities that we all live in who have neighbors who we all love, right? So I love most of my neighbors. There's a neighbor I don't know, so I can't love him yet because I don't know him yet. But you know, that small community that I learned working with the YMCA when I first started figuring out that people could not afford some of the YMCA programming that we offered in the community, and that the people who went to the YMCA at that time donated money for the scholarships to help kids go to camp. And the ability to help a kid, let's say, go to camp and have a week, and some people say, oh, they got a week away from their family and in the city, in the mountains, and fresh air. And I go, they not only got that week of fresh air, they got an opportunity to be engaged with other people in a way that gave them hope and aspiration. And when I think about the work that we do on a regular basis, is not just about solving the one problem they have, that they're hungry or that they're homeless or that they're housing insecure. It's how do we really kind of lean to people and give them the ability to be successful by providing them with information, by engaging them with love and care, and by helping them be the best they could possibly be and be resilient. So that's our hope every day, is to live into people and love into their lives so they can be successful.
Such a beautiful way to describe that. And thank you for sharing more of some of the different things and different facets of work that you've been involved in. Henry, how about you?
Yeah, I enjoy hearing those testimonials from LaVal and from Wallace as well. That's fantastic. And I've been working in the nonprofit sector for about 25 years. And, you know, though I've had a corporate background, I realized that my focus wasn't to help a firm maximize its profit. I wanted to help people. So I've had a career working at the Center for Nonprofit Management in Los Angeles to help nonprofit staff with their professional development by providing them training. And I got, you know, a little burned out after that, and went to graduate school, studied public policy, and there I really began to learn the differences in terms of economics being balanced between market efficiency versus equity, and being able to help out low-income families and children at the time that they need it. So I was really impressed with United Way's work on community impact, focusing on a health, education, financial stability model, and trying to figure out what we can do to support these organizations who are providing these great services throughout the entire state. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome, thank you. And Henry, you were starting to use some terminology that is bringing us beautifully into the start of our conversation. So when we say economics, what do we mean, and what other tools and terms should we know about upfront before we start diving in deeper this morning?
Yeah, I mean, so I could just re-echo some of the things I just talked about from my background in studying public policy. It's just the tension between maximizing profit versus and equity, and then how do you use those resources, right? Just in terms of like, especially for the work of 211, how do you use the resources that are available within Orange County to help people at the time that they need it? If it's like from domestic shelter, finding them access to a food bank on a local level, being able to find out like what resources we actually have available. There are obviously limited resources that we have at any given time, but what can we do to help people at the time that they need it? So we at United Way are focusing on a couple of initiatives statewide that we're working with local United Ways, and that effort is My Free Taxes. So during the tax season, we have local United Ways who are partnering with other organizations on the ground. We're providing free tax assistance because we know how expensive tax planning can get as well, and it's getting increasingly expensive too. We're partnering with many USDAs statewide on a farm workers grant with the USDA, where we're providing just temporary relief assistance for farm workers and their families, especially in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, and supporting the work of local United Ways, who have been providing housing assistance, financial assistance to many families, also in the height of the pandemic, and now we're doing it with that now. So, housing, of course, is the big supply and demand issue of the day, and we know that there's limited housing stock, and what we can actually do to make that housing stock more robust, but also more affordable. So the demand is there for housing. Everybody from a college kid graduating out of college is looking for a place to rent, probably can't afford to do it on their own. So what are the things that we can actually need to focus on as society to look at the macroeconomic issues in terms of housing affordability? And I'm glad to have that conversation with you here today.
I'm hearing that economics is so much more than just an individual budget, and that there are a lot of factors that go into this. Wallace, what are some other factors? You mentioned time earlier as being another factor that we need to be looking at. Pat, would you like to expand on that for us?
Sure. When we did the prep call, I think one of the things we said was, yes, supply and demand is an issue, but that it goes beyond that. And sometimes it's hard for an economist to move beyond, it's just purely a supply and demand issue. But it is a highly complex issue. And, Orange County is not alone. There's many other parts, as Henry knows, in California that are kind of in the same boat as Orange County, unfortunately. I think, and we actually just released our community indicators report, which you can go to our website. I think it might be United Way was a key partner as well. And so we do a special feature or special section every year. And it was about housing affordability. It's especially hard right now because of mortgage rates and interest rates. Those are much more than they have been in the recent past, and that both it affects the housing market in a lot of ways. But I think when I think about the real issue, to move a little bit beyond supply and demand, it is that wages just have not kept up with the cost of living. And the major part of that in a place like California, and especially Orange County, is housing. And we're not just talking about home ownership, but we're talking about just renting as well. So I think wages just have not kept up with the costs. And the other part that I think on the supply side is, I think people don't like change very much sometimes. And so when a new, say a new affordable housing project is proposed, you often get people coming out of many more people coming to speak against it, like at a planning commission or a city council, than you do for it. And same thing for homeless facilities. So I think it's just such a highly complex issue that the more data that we can bring, and there's just a wealth of data. I was very impressed with the real cost measure that United Way has developed. And I know Henry's going to speak to that. That really, in a nice, beautiful dashboard kind of manner, it really explains the issue very, very clearly. And hopefully our community indicators also helps a little bit, but we can understand this problem. And I think once we understand it, we can figure out how to address it. And there's been a lot of people who have, tried, but I think we need a concerted county-wide effort. And that was the message coming out of our report release yesterday is we need to, just as a county, address this issue head on. And United Way has been the leader so far. So a lot of kudos and applause for for United Way.
Thank you. It's a huge issue, and that's why we are here talking about it today. LaVal, when you're working with families, when you and your team are working with families, what are some other ways that economics comes into play there?
So there's several things that happen around economics. One, and I've said this recently to a lot of people. When I talk to my children about their money and about economics and about their living and about all the things that revolve around finances, I'm now able, because of more experience and more learning and more understanding, to guide them than my mother was able to guide me. Right. So when we think, and my mother was wonderful, she did the best she could, but she had what she had. Right. So when I think about how much better my children are right this minute than I was, because of that coaching and the understanding and talking about, you can't spend more than 30% of your income on your housing, and have my children go and believe me and go, okay, so that means we have to do something in order for you to make that happen. So many families that we work with don't have that guidance. They don't have that guidance. They haven't had that engagement. No one is talking to them about the fact that living in Riverside and driving to Orange County, while you can live in Riverside and drive to Orange County, you are giving up some of your income and your time every single day to afford that house there and to have job here. So for us, we are trying constantly to help families and individuals learn what is the cost, what is the true cost of the actions that they have going forward, and that sometimes living in Orange County and having the best school may not be affordable. So how do you? Like, what do you need to do? So for us, it's really around guiding people, helping them understand, but also recognizing that the resources that we put out in the community, especially in our hunger program, I drive 5 minutes to my local grocery store. But for most families who are going to a food pantry, they're often driving more than 5 minutes, and they're not getting all that they would get if they were going to the regular grocery store. But yet that's their only option. So even those economics around what we do and how we create opportunities for low-income families and individuals to be engaged and access the resources, the economics around that are also poor. And we have to figure out how to lift up those economics of the nonprofits who are supporting these communities in a way that makes financial sense and provides families with what they need, when they need it, where they need to have it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So it is not a controversial thing to say that it is expensive to live in Orange County. So I'm going to ask the big ticket question. Why? Why is it so expensive to live in Orange County? And I'm going to put you on the spot, Wallace.
Well, it could be a very short answer. When we look at that and compared to other places, housing costs are like 95% of the differential. Food costs are pretty similar everywhere. The other things that you buy, very similar, transportation, etc. I guess the question is, why is housing so expensive? And we could get into a little bit of a circular thing there, but I do think we are feeling the impacts of it just being too expensive. And the reason I say that, when we look at our population, we have actually lost population in Orange County for the last 3 years, about 15,000 people on average per year. California has lost 600,000 people, have moved out of California. And it's interesting, in Orange County, the components of change for that 15,000 are, yes, we have births every year. I think it's about 7,000 per year births. We have international migration that's very steady. It's the net of people moving out of Orange County versus to anywhere else in the US, to people moving from anywhere else in the US to Orange County. And that's, last year it was about 30,000. It's been averaging about 30,000 people net leaving Orange County. And when I started doing this, our population was still growing, but people who moved out of Orange County, 80% of those people moved to like the Inland Empire for housing. Now, and they would commute back in, as you referred to, LaVal. Now, 75% of the people move out of state. And they move to places that are just lower cost places. So it has become a real, it's a real competitive disadvantage for us. And I think we have to figure out how to make it the whole county more affordable. And part of that does come with wage increases. We have to continue to grow good paying jobs here to help people afford to live and work in Orange County. Because if we're in kind of this doom cycle downward, because when we mostly lose people who are 20 to 40 years old. So we also lose the children that they would have had in Orange County. And that's why we actually do have declining K through 12 enrollment in Orange County right now. So it's something we really need to address big time.
Wow. I mean, I knew that we had a lot of people, younger adults, leaving Orange County due to the challenges of housing, but I hadn't realized that we were already seeing that impact on K through 12.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
That's really quickly, just to contextualize that a little bit for low-income families. A low-income family who cannot afford to live in Orange County, cannot afford to live in Riverside, they don't actually have a lot of options for moving, right? So let's contextualize some of this. Like, if you're already struggling and you could barely pay your rent, to come up with $5,000, $7,000 to move your house, move all of your possessions across the country, that's not a poor person's strategy, right? That's a hard strategy to come up with $5,000 to move across country. So the privilege to even move out of California into another place is privilege.
Mm-hmm.
It's a privilege to do that. And in some cases, I have a good number of friends who've moved to Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, you name it, beautiful places bigger than the house they have now. They also work from home, or they have a consulting job, or they have more flexibility, they have more income. So while this number is shocking and we keep saying it, it doesn't actually help a lot of the low-income families who live where we are, and a lot of them don't have a place to go. So I think it's important for us to, those numbers are shocking, and we need to pay attention to that, and we need to figure some way to fix it. But our low-income families are struggling, and they can't just up and move.
That's great context. Thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why having this conversation about the impacts, the economical impacts, and how that the knock-on effect it has on homelessness is so important, because you're right. The people that are migrating away from our community are the people that can afford to do so. You are absolutely correct. And it's the people that are being challenged with the high cost of housing, their wages not rising to match that are being forced into these impossible situations. So thank you, LaVal, for very clearly directing us into that.
And really quickly, the knock-on effect is I have friends who moved out of their homes and moved to other places. They kept their houses and now they're renting them. And they're renting them at a rate that is unaffordable for some families to move into their homes. So they're not even selling their homes to someone who could move out of a rental unit into a new location, which is a compounding effect.
Henry, I saw you unmute, so I wanted to see if you wanted to add something in here.
No, both of those points are exactly right. And I just wanted to echo what Wallace said too, just in terms of just the income hasn't caught up with the rate of costing goods and services that are rising as well. So I just want to present a little slide, if I may, just to kind of just present what it actually costs for a family of four to make ends meet in Orange County and in California. So give me one quick second here. And so we created this study called the Real Cost Measure for what it takes to make ends meet throughout California. And one of the things that we did, first of all, is calculate household budgets. We calculated the cost of living from 1 adult in a household all the way up to 19 adults in a household for all 58 counties in California. And here's what it looks like for Orange County, is that we've calculated that it takes 2 adults, 1 preschooler, and 1 school-age child. They're going to have to earn at least $110,000 annually to make ends meet. And this is just the very bare bones minimum, right? In terms of just basic needs with housing, childcare, healthcare, food, and all the other things. But we're finding that overall, throughout California, and this slide really speaks to it, is that the cost of childcare and housing are the 2 primary barriers that are preventing families to make ends meet. So this is a very bare bones budget. And to show how bare bones this is, we use fair market rent rates by HUD, which is basically used for Section 8 housing. And you can actually just see, just from that bare bones minimum, it's $28,000 for housing for this family of 4. But we know many families are paying significantly more than that on an annual basis for housing, right? At least 30, 40% higher. But one of the things that we're noticing too lately is that many more families are spending just as much for childcare as they are for housing, right? And we know how childcare is expensive. We know how hard it is to be able to put your kid in a slot. And often many families have to travel long distances in order to find that affordable childcare. So what they often do, especially for families who are struggling, they often rely on family and friends to take care of their families. So it's that persistent need, just in terms of, we're seeing everything go up, especially gas prices, especially over the past couple of years. And California has already had the highest gas prices in the country. And for low-income families, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fill up my gas tank today in order to get to work, in order to take my kid to school. So there's always making these sacrifices each and every day. And for those who are falling below the real cost measure, some of these families could easily be paying 60, 70, or 80% of their income on housing alone, just because of the prevalence of expensive housing, not only in Orange County, but throughout the whole state. So this is actually, I deem this a cost of living crisis, and this is a public health crisis. And as Wallace and others alluded to, is that we need to start correcting this through interventions pretty darn quickly, or else it's going to get harder over the long term.
Can I follow up on just 2 points that brought up, if that's okay? One is, I'm very fortunate to be part of a team at First 5 Orange County that's looking at childcare. And First 5 is doing some amazing work in that space. And one of the things that I'm sort of working on is to make it easier to put childcare facilities in new affordable housing and existing affordable housing projects. And we have Jamboree Housing is one of the top affordable housing developers in the state. National Core is a big presence in Orange County as well. So we have been working with them and working with cities to make it easier for childcare facilities to go in. The other observation, so that's a tangible example of something that's actually going on in Orange County. That I was very interested, is Marin the top or bottom 58?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, is that why? The one thing I know about Marin, it's very difficult to develop new housing in Marin County. I don't know if it's at the countywide level, but many of the cities have basically slow or no growth initiatives. The other one, I know you don't have it today, but I'd be interested, is Ventura, because Ventura is kind of the same way. Ventura has this thing called the SOAR initiative, and basically they have stopped building new housing in Ventura County. That's probably 10 plus years ago. So I'd love to see what that looks like for Ventura County.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that, I mean, those restrictions actually across the state, in terms of just the restrictions in terms of adding this to the supply of housing as well. And that's one of the primary reasons why costs have increased so much.
Yeah.
Well, Henry, thank you for kind of popping that slide up there. I'm sure that there were some people who saw that and saw it's about $109,000 in Orange County, which is a very different number than we would see when we talk about the poverty line. And so I think it's important for us to dig in here, because we hear about sort of the poverty level and what that earning threshold is in all communities around the place. So I'd love to talk a little bit, about what that's looking out, what that measures, and then the real cost measure, and what's the difference between these two?
Yeah, the differences between the two measures are profound. So the official poverty measure was actually founded during the 1960s during Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. And as a general good practice, if we're going to declare a war on something, it's probably a good idea to have some sort of an instrument to measure it by. So very famously, Molly Orshansky within his labor department looked at the cost of living for many families during the 1950s and 60s. And they noticed that the primary expense was food. And it was basically essentially, so the official poverty measure was based upon the price of 3 baskets of food, right, during that time in the middle of the 1960s. For all intents and purposes, we're still using that formula today to calculate the poverty measure. So it doesn't take into account the cost of housing, childcare, transportation, and all the other basic needs of life. And another thing that the official poverty measure doesn't do, it doesn't take into account geographical differences. So it treats poverty exactly the same way as it does in Alabama, as it does in California. We know that the cost of living is extremely different in both of those two places. So, so the official poverty measure has been outdated pretty much almost from the moment it was conceived. And that has to be corrected, to say the least, on a national level. So to help address that, the deficiencies within the official poverty measure, we created a self-sufficiency standard called the real cost measure, which incorporates the basic needs of life: housing, childcare, healthcare, food, transportation. So when we do that, and the focus of the real cost measure is on working households. So overall, I mean, when we exclude seniors and when we exclude households led by people with disabilities who traditionally aren't in the labor market, the official poverty measure is only about 9% in Orange County. But we find with the real cost measure, when you take into account all those basic needs of life, 33% of families in Orange County are struggling to make ends meet. And when we quantify that, that's over 302,000 households that are struggling. So it's a third of the population in Orange County who are struggling to make ends meet each and every day. So they're constantly making sacrifices in terms of what they can do. So I'm going to go ahead and just show another screenshot, if I will, just to show the degree of struggle in terms of what it looks like in Orange County. And I think this probably won't surprise you once I put it up on the screen here, but you can actually just see the rate of struggle among families here in Orange County. And the areas that are struggling the most are pretty much Anaheim, Garden Grove, and Santa Ana, the dark brown areas. But notice the diversity of income challenges throughout the entire region. In the South Coast, where the beach communities are, they're a little bit better off, but it's a 15-20 minute commute at the very least between Rancho Santa Margarita and Santa Ana. So it should almost be its own different country just in terms of just survivability within that county alone. But you can actually just see the big extremes here. 56% of families in the eastern part of Santa Ana City are struggling to make ends meet, compared to 17% of Rancho Santa Margarita and Ladera Ranch. So what we're using is U.S. Census public use microdata areas. It's great because it focuses on neighborhoods, but it also consolidates neighborhoods to get a sample size of 100,000 people to make it statistically reliable. So there's like a 99% confidence interval in this data. And so if we were to repeat it numerous times, this is how it would probably shake out. But you can actually just see in terms of where households are really struggling throughout the entire region.
Thank you, Henry. It's powerful to see it displayed on a map like that. Wallace, I saw you unmuted, so I'll let you jump in here.
Oh yeah, just really quick. I'm a big fan of maps, and I actually do work with Esri on some stuff. You wouldn't believe, Henry, you probably know this in LaVal, how many maps look like that. Not just your map on this particular subject, and that just shows how integral this is to families and people being successful across. You could put up health indicators, you could put up educational indicators, you could put up a lot of indicators. The map would roughly similar to the map you just showed there, Henry.
Yeah, and these are just the basic needs of life, but we're not talking about the other expenses that families often have to deal with: utilities, credit cards, student loans, right? Even prom dresses for kids for high school, and families, like a third of the families are trying to figure out how to pay for that. So this is a genuine problem that we need to start facing pretty quickly.
Well, I know that most of the work that you do is in the south part of the county, but I know that you are seeing, the harshness of the economic realities and the work that you're doing. So I would really love to hear from your perspective. What are you seeing?
So we talked about this a little bit. The map that we just looked at, if you take the South County and the beach cities, they look like everything is great, right? Those cities and those areas are doing wonderful, and it is for those who have the income. But for those who don't have the income, and let's step away from the 30% below the poverty line. Let's take that level that is just above that and below wealthy. They're struggling. They're struggling, and one little hiccup. They don't have savings, and I shouldn't say I'm making a generalization, but a good portion are not able to put in savings to have that nest egg in case something goes wrong. They're giving up, in some cases, they're giving up the things that could propel their families. And I use this conversation pretty regularly when we talk about how do we save people money in our food pantry. If I can have a family save $200 a month, and that gives them the ability to send their kid who is an aspiring child who wants to go to science camp in the summer, that ability to go to science camp so they can better their career, they can go into college, they can find more income in a career that they enjoy. That's a real benefit. But there are families who are giving up the things that can actually help their family be more successful because they don't have the income or because they don't have the capacity to move that forward. That's just that piece above the poverty line. And while we need to give every effort we possibly can to those who are below the poverty line, and we should be giving all our energy towards fixing that, we need to make sure we don't forget there are people who are right on the edge, who are very, very close to the edge and can fall into that poverty line very quickly, and that only exacerbates the problem. And we have to find a way as a society, as an organization, to recognize that while I'm doing okay, my neighbor may not be doing okay. And that my societal care for my neighborhood that I moved into, that I said, I want to move into this neighborhood, that the neighbor next to me who isn't doing well, I should care about, because that's why I moved in the neighborhood. I moved in the neighborhood for the good school. So the kid who's in the school who's not doing well, I should care about. That's why I moved there. And unfortunately, I think there's a good number of us who just don't recognize that love and care for our neighbors who are struggling affects all of us. It affects them deeply, but it also affects our entire community.
I just want to echo what you just said, LaVal. And one of the things that we're finding too is that up to 98% of families who are falling below the real cost measure have at least one working adult. So what it tells us is that most of these families are working multiple jobs, different hours, different rates. And so just take a look at a family who's working in retail or in manufacturing. That's mostly seasonal work. And if we're coming into the holidays and retailers are asking folks to come in, interview, and ask existing employees to increase their hours because it's going to get really busy during the holiday season, what happens in January? The demand decreases, so people are asked to reduce their hours and your pay decreases. And the same goes for many industries in agriculture and in manufacturing. So one of the things that tells us is that these are families that are probably not, that even if they were able to fully maximize all the public benefits available to them, they still wouldn't even come close to making ends meet. So that's a pretty strong narrative just in terms of the challenges that these families are working through each and every day. Let me go ahead and just pull up another slide, if you will indulge me for a second, because this really speaks to the challenges that we're seeing. So we mentioned this family of 4 with 2 adults, 1 preschooler, 1 school-age child has to earn at least $109,000 to make ends meet. This is what the average income for that family below the real cost measure looks like. It's about $60,000 in wages. It's about $250 from CalWorks, which is our version of the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. And it's about $1,000 from the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is one of the most successful anti-poverty programs that we have here in the US. So if that family was able to utilize all those wages and public benefits available to them, it's on average about $60,000 in income and benefits. But look at the income gap that they face to reach the real cost measure. It's almost $50,000. So the question for us is how do families do it each and every day? And it's always constant sacrifices, push and pulls, negotiating with the landlord, see if you can pay half your rent this month and catch up with the rest next month, and being able to skip out on transportation, eating out, whatever sacrifices that these families make is what they'll do to make ends meet.
Yeah, and Bex, I mean, when you look at that amount, a family of two, so two adults in a household, have to make $26.50 an hour and work 40 hours a week to do that. And yeah, there are plenty of people who are making that amount of money. Now, I got to tell you, there's a lot of nonprofits who are struggling to get to that point today to make sure their own staff do not live within that poverty line. And there needs to be support for those organizations who are working hard and are not getting the revenue from the government to help solve some of these problems that the government and the business sector are leaving at our feet. But at the same time, when you think about $26.50 an hour, that's minimum wage is $15.50. Okay. So in other words, if you're making minimum wage, you're not making it. You're not going to make it. You're nowhere close. So now what do you have to do? You have to work two jobs. So you and your spouse are working two jobs. What does that do to the family unit? What does that do to the community? What does that do to create an environment for children and families to thrive and be better off so they don't actually need services well into the future? It does nothing to do that. And we have to figure out how to get ahead of this, because it is not the United States of America's legacy to have people not have the ability to live up to this American dream. And we have to figure out a way to fix that problem.
You know, the other trend that's come on just in the last few years is actually inflation. And inflation, even though it seems like it's a little bit more under control than it was last year, that doesn't mean prices are going to be rolled back. And basic necessities like food, if I think you add up things, they are 20, 25, 30% more expensive now than they were just maybe 2 years ago. So that's an added pressure, probably.
It is, and I don't think we're going to see those food prices roll back.
Yeah.
Henry, I know that with the real cost measure, there's sort of an interactive place that people can go to if they were interested in kind of plugging in some numbers and different kind of household sizes. Would you be able to just kind of let people know where that is and what they can do there?
I'm gonna go ahead and put the link on the chat, but there's a whole bunch of interactive resources that we have to offer. So we call it our real cost measure dashboard. And we also have like a full page executive summary if people want to read a 25-page brief in terms of what it takes to make ends meet. But there's in that interactive dashboard, there's interactive maps. We can actually just hover over the neighborhoods that you're living in and what it looks like throughout Orange County, for example. And we actually have some really great data in terms of the real cost measure. Also, housing burden, the percentage of families that are spending at least 30% of their income on housing, which, as we were talked about, when we were younger, we were told not to spend more than 30% of our income on housing. Just very few people who are able to do that throughout Orange County. And then we also look at median household earnings as well. And then another cool feature that we have on our website is an interactive budgets calculator. So you can actually just select the county that you live in on our sites, put in the age numbers of everybody in your household, and you can it will show you the minimum that it would take for this household to make ends meet. So one of the favorite things that I've heard about from people who actually use it, it's a great financial literacy tool. And even if you have a teenager who is really hungry at 3 o'clock in the afternoon after football practice, opens a refrigerator door, empties everything out because they're so hungry, and then 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening comes along and dinner, family is all there. They open up the refrigerator and they realize everything's empty. this could be a good general intervention opportunity to educate your family in terms of the cost of food, for this household. And while you're at it, talk about housing and transportation costs and what it takes to pay for a car, your car payment, and all the other utilities, because it will get kids to be really focused on terms of what they need to do after hopefully they graduate from college and lead a successful life on their own. But it's becoming incredibly challenging, as we're talking about, as during a prep call, is that even for a kid who's graduated from college, pretty good, even if it's a really great school, a four-year school like your Irvine, it's pretty increasingly hard for them to be able to find affordable housing on their own because of the cost of living in the region. So it creates a financial literacy tool, and it's also a tool that we don't want the real cost measure study to live on a website, nor do we want this community indicators report to live on a website either. We want this as an action tool so that people can actually engage elected officials, housing developers, childcare providers, fellow nonprofits, the entire business sector, in terms of what we need to do individually and collectively to help improve the cost of living for everybody in Orange County.
So many ways to use that tool. That's fantastic. Wallace, I want to come to you. I know we have some other tools that are also available. So could you shed some light on those?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think maybe the community indicators report was dropped in the chat. We just released it yesterday, so it's the most recent data that we could get when we put together the report. We do talk about housing every year in there, but this year in the special feature, we talk about why is housing affordability such a challenge? And I mean, one of the things to think about is that the state has made new housing development a big priority. And they have enacted a lot of pieces of legislation to try to address this. And hopefully that will start working more than it has been, but it's a long-standing, difficult issue that's highly, highly complex. So I think one of the panelists yesterday, Gregory Scott, put it really well, that if you had looked at this issue maybe 10 years ago, it was already an issue, or 15 years ago, it was already an issue. It has become worse. There's no question about that. He doesn't want to come back to the event next year and it still be as bad an issue as it is right now. So it is something that we need to address as a county. I don't think success is going to happen like at the local level. It has to be a county-wide effort. And once again, a lot of kudos to United Way for leading a lot of this effort. There are others out there that need to come to the table. I think I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic than some people are, even though maybe from some of the data I talk about, it doesn't sound like I'm optimistic. I think we have an opportunity to working probably with the business community and working with the development community to really try to address this. And I think it's a multidimensional how it has to be addressed. But I do think they're hopefully coming out of the discussion yesterday. There was a nice article in the OC Register that Jeff Collins, the reporter, wrote. I thought he did a great job of it. We really need to keep the focus on this. I think I described it as the Achilles heel of Orange County. At the countywide level, a lot of our indicators look great. They look a lot of the ones when you drill down, like Henry's map, they look kind of like Henry's map. Our economy overall is doing better than any other economy in Southern California. And this is just the thing that we need everybody to focus on and be a part of the solution here. And, home ownership is actually declining. It declined in the last year by, I think it was 0.5%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's quite a bit. So we need a lot of, working alongside with the state, because the state definitely is motivated now, after not being motivated for a long time, to try to address this issue. And nobody wants to lose at the county level 15,000 per year. Nobody wants at the state level to have lost 600,000 population in the last 3 years, basically. That's bad for everybody.
So what can we do? Now, we've had a lot of people have joined today, and this, as you said, is a very nuanced, difficult subject to wrap your arms around. But I know from the amount of people that RSVP'd to come to this and who have been with us as we've been talking about this for 50 minutes, what can people do after today?
Well, I've got a couple ideas. One is don't take this information that you have in front of you and not spread it to others. So an example is yesterday at the community indicators, UCI talked about how they need to hire 1,200 people at their new facility, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's one of the things he said, which sticks to me because I have a nursing student who's going to nursing school, and she's going to come back to Orange County and she's going to get a job, and that's going to be awesome that she's going to have that work. And it's great that she's going to be able to live with me for a little while to do that. And at some point in time, she's going to want to move out, and she will have enough money to just make it above that poverty line with the job that she has, but she will have no more. Right. So she's just above the poverty line as a nurse graduating, and she's going to make that happen. Well, here's the thing. We need people who say things like, well, it's okay if you live in Riverside and work in Orange County, to stop saying that. It's time for us to stop saying, well, you have to make tough decisions. Well, what tough decisions are we talking about? Because a tough decision, I think of a nurse or an employee who has to spend their time on the road instead of being productive at work, as a loss of productivity for my business and for our community. And anyone who brings this up is, well, it's just expensive here, so you got to move somewhere else. We need to rebuke them.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do it with data, and we need to do it with a sensible response. But we can't keep saying it's okay. We can't allow this to happen, because those are the people who come into the city council and say, I'm worried about these people who are coming in who don't have any money. Well, what are you worried about? What is it that you're actually worried about? You worried that low-income people are going to come steal from you? Because I think there's a whole bunch of wealthy people who steal from us every day. And we don't talk about them living next door to us. So what are we actually talking about? What is it that we're dealing with? We can't allow our neighbors and our communities and our friends to not have the information that makes a healthy community, which includes people who don't have as much money as you. Right? So that's one. The second is, and this is from a nonprofit perspective, and I know we're always having our hands out, but the reality is that the service providers, then the Family Solutions Collaborative, the service providers who are helping individuals, the shelters, the organizations who are working out there on a daily basis, they need additional support in order to help solve this problem. And when the economic downturn is happening like it is right now, it's becoming more and more difficult for us to help solve this problem. And the gap between business and government who solve these problems is the nonprofit community. And they're underfunded and under-resourced to attack this problem. And somehow, some way, we need to figure out how to make it possible for us to be fully resourced to solve the problems that everyone is recognizing on a daily basis and want to see solved. That's my 2 cents.
I just want to echo those words and also just celebrate the work of the nonprofit sector in Orange County for especially all the heroic work that they've done during the pandemic and the immediate after pandemic to help families in need each and every day, from food banks. Orange County United Way was really critical in providing emergency financial assistance for families throughout the entire region, and we'll always be grateful for the work that they've done. 211 really stepped in terms of trying to help people at the time that they need it. So lots of the nonprofits throughout the entire region have just been working really hard to address a lot of the macroeconomic deficiencies that we have within our climate as well. But it's clear to us that most of the struggling households are renters. So we need to find out how we can actually help renters to make sure that they're able to stay in their communities, stay in their homes, And as we mentioned, it's really expensive to move even from one house to another, one apartment to another. Most families can't, as LaVal said, don't have $5,000 in immediate assets to do that. So being able to subsidize renters, even like support like even $200 or $300, and that sort of intervention program can go a long way to making sure that a family doesn't get evicted, right? So, but I've always been a champion of things like a renter's tax credit. It's because the cost of home ownership is so incredibly unaffordable, and we're just Wallace is talking about 7.5 interest rates is just insane right now within the housing market. So we need to look at the supply issue and the affordability issue, and it's not going to take one person, one organization to do this. It's going to take all of us together.
Absolutely. And I think the one other thing I guess I'd add is the philanthropic community has a big role to play in this space, I think. And I think we need to, United Way's done a fantastic job, but I think we need to get other philanthropic institutions to I think they are aware of the issue. I think sometimes they think it's such a big issue that what can our dollars do? But I think there are ways that the philanthropic community should be able to be a part of the solution. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have work in front of us for sure. You know,
Hey, Bex, I just want to add one more thing. And the work that y'all are doing with apartment owners and getting them to see low-income families who have housing vouchers or who have needs to be able to let them lease. I think United Way is doing a great job of doing that. We need to continue to get apartment owners to take these housing vouchers seriously and allow those families to really kind of move into a space where they can be more successful.
We had a few questions that came in the Q&A box, and there was a sort of similar theme through them. And they were sort of bouncing off a comment that you made earlier, Wallace, about sort of backlash to affordable housing developments coming into a community. So I wanted to reference a couple of reports. The Livable Cities Lab from UCI did a report looking at the impact of affordable housing and permanent supportive housing in neighborhoods. The big sort of question was, does it have a negative impact? Will crime go up and will property values go down if you have any kind of affordable housing in your neighborhood? There's links popping into the chat box to there. The results are pretty simple, but deeply profound. Crime rate is not impacted. Property values are not impacted. If anything, they go up. So that we have the data. And so there's the report link has gone in there. And I believe we also have a kind of video conversation as well about that. That will pop that link in for anybody that wants to watch that. And I don't know if anybody, we've got 2 minutes left, if anybody wanted to drop any little nuggets into this dynamic.
Yeah, you know, you always want to look at your assets as well as your challenges. In terms of affordable housing developers, that's a real asset that I know they're doing great work already. But Jamboree Housing and National Core and others, those are 2 of the 3 best affordable housing developers in the state. And I guess the last thing I'll say is the former CEO at OCBC was Lucy Dunn. And Lucy came to OCBC from being the State Housing and Community Development Director. And it's great that we have this info for Orange County, but that's been replicated lots for the state and lots of other places, that the conclusions about affordable housing projects somehow causing declines in value is false. It's just completely false.
It's also not the picture of the affordable housing providers of the 60s. So people think that we're talking about the projects of the 60s and the 50s coming into to space today. They're not looking at what's actually happening, and they should see some of the beautiful developments that have been created in Orange County, and the families who desire to live here, grow their families, and be successful members of the community. This is an opportunity for us to really continue to be a diverse wonderful growing community. Should not be a fear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are right at time. So I want to thank everybody that tuned in today. There will be a poll that's going to pop up. So if you have some time to respond to that poll, that always helps us in planning our future events. Really hope that today's conversation is going to empower attendees to be more engaged in their local community and advocacy efforts. We do train people if the word advocacy, you're like, well, that sounds a little bit frightening. We have an advocacy 101 class that we will gladly, walk you through that, make that a little less intimidating to get involved in that level. And as I mentioned at the start, it is Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. We do have 2 in-person events coming up next week. If you are watching and you're local to Orange County, we are going to be in Mission Viejo next Monday night, so November 13th. And we will be in Orange the next evening on Tuesday, November 14th. We will have a light dinner, so we hope to join you for a meal and then a conversation where we're doing a deeper dive into causes of homelessness in Orange County. But from today's session, you probably got it. And then also looking at resources for how people are able to try to navigate the system. And we're going to have dialogues around that. Lots of room for you to get to meet people from your community. Be from 6 till 8. If you want dinner, come join us at 5:30. I'll be at both of those. Thank you again. Thank you, LaVal. Thank you, Wallace. Thank you, Henry, for such an informative discussion. Really meaningful. This will go up on our YouTube. So we'll have it there. We'll send out the link to everybody so you can pass it on to anybody who also needs to be aware of this information. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.